Hi, my name is Jasmine. My husband Gozier and I are foreigners living and working in Ecuador. Oh, and we also now have a baby. In today's video, I'm giving you all the details that went into planning my multi-family vacation that I just went on with my family, and I'll also share some tips and tricks on how you can execute a similar trip for your family.
Something I've always wanted to do was plan a trip for my whole entire family to be together, to hang out, and just travel. I am actually a traveler myself and an expat living abroad for over 6 years now, and the experiences that I have had have been life-changing, and I've always wanted to give those types of opportunities to my family members. And so I planned my very first multi-family vacation this past winter in Colorado, and chef's kiss. It was amazing. So in this video, I'm gonna give you all the information, all the resources, everything that I use to plan my multi-family vacations so that you can do so too. One of the things I can't share in this video will be in the blog post that I'll link below, as well as the resource guide that you can download for free after you watch this video. Let's talk about how you're gonna start the planning process. First and foremost, if you are thinking of having some sort of family vacation, you are most likely going to be the point person because you're the one that's thinking of these things even before there is a notion of a trip. And here are the things you want to know about your duties as a point person. You are going to be responsible for a lot. And if you're like me and you like planning, organizing, talking, and all the things that go with this role, then you'll be fine. But if you don't like these things, then know ahead of time that you're going to need to ask for a lot of help. You're gonna need to learn how to delegate, and that's fine. I even asked for help. I kind of assigned people to different roles because I knew that they would be good fits for certain types of tasks. You can think about it that way too, but just know it is a big responsibility to be the point person because you're not only dealing with people, you're dealing with their money, you're dealing with taking them away from the safety of their home, the comforts of what they're used to, and going on vacation means you're going somewhere else. So you want to make sure that you have your responsibility cap on ahead of time, just so that, you know, people can feel safe and people can be comfortable with the notion of a trip before you present all of the things that are gonna come with a multi-family vacation. So after you have been assigned as the point person, or you assign somebody as the point person, you next want to gain interest amongst your family members. And this also pertains to friends as well. If you just want to plan a big group trip, use this to help you do that as well. Gaining interest helps you kind of know who would be a good fit for the trip. I mean, you kind of want to make sure that people mesh well together. You don't want to just invite anybody and everybody. You want to make sure that people have some sort of a relationship, or if they don't, that they would really get along together because you know your friendship groups, you know your family groups, and you know the dynamics that would mix well or not mix very well. Know those things ahead of time, and as you're sending out your initial text messages like I did, you can just ask a simple question of, hey, I'm thinking about planning a cabin trip, for example. Would you and your family be interested in joining maybe around, and then give like a loose date or a loose time frame, just depending on kind of what you already have in mind. And once people say yes or no, or I'm available or not available during this time, then you can have an idea of, okay, so this many people are interested, so I need to book an accommodation for this many people. Additionally, you can create a Google spreadsheet or some sort of document that allows people to share their ideas and their preferences, you know, kind of in the initial stage of this planning process, if that's important to you. Once you have your initial interests and maybe the loose number of people that might be joining you on this family vacation or friend vacation, you then want to start to look at accommodations to accommodate the amount of people that you think might join this trip. So for me, it was 14 people solid. So that made it really easy for me to look for accommodations that were 14 people and up. And it's important to kind of look at accommodating more people if you can, just to keep those costs down, because the less amount of people that you have on your trip, the higher the price is going to be. And so 14 people was perfect to help kind of split costs that way. Also gave me a lot of wiggle room in the different properties that I was looking at as well. I would say that a lot of the properties that I saw on Airbnb and Vrbo and private companies were around 10 to 15 people for a good price, and then higher for more expensive properties. But again, you can split the cost with more people. So with lodging, you also want to keep in mind the preferences people people may have personalities, ages, interests, disabilities as well. If you have somebody who is in a wheelchair, then you want to make sure that your space is wheelchair accessible and things like that. So you want to be really mindful of all of those different things, because it's also going to help when you assign rooms or when people pick rooms. You want to make sure that people are comfortable, even in the planning process, because it'll help you get more people to join you on your trip. So like I mentioned, we did a cabin trip, and cabins are notoriously known to be in the middle of nowhere, but I was not comfortable staying in the middle of nowhere. So I made sure to book a cabin that still had proximity to a town, and then a bigger town was about 30 minutes away, where there was a Walmart, gas stations, all the things that you could ever want, and not feel so secluded if you did in fact need to get out. So definitely think of your lodging in terms of its proximity to restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, activities, and whatever is important to you and your group. So once you kind of have an idea of lodging, here is where the communication comes into play. You want to make sure communication is as crystal clear as you can make it. You don't want anybody to feel left out, in the dark, not aware of plans. It's important to have different ways to communicate, and it's not because people are necessarily lazy or they don't really care about communicating. It also could just be learning styles. And when it comes to something as important as a family trip, again, where people are spending money and time and being away from where they feel most comfortable, everybody needs to be on the exact same page and know as much information as they can. It's so important to have an initial document with all of your own thoughts in that initial document, and have everything written down so it's concise, well written, and it answers as many questions as you can anticipate being asked to you, because you don't want to make it harder for yourself by just giving people just a little snippet of what to expect and then be flooded with a whole bunch of questions. Anticipate the questions before they're asked. And of course, it's okay if people do have questions after the fact, but just think about like the baseline types of questions people might have, and I'll have those down in the description box below in that resource guide as well too. So some of the ways that I communicated, again, I mentioned email, I set up a group chat, I created an initial document as well, again, with all my thoughts, with what the initial prices could be based off of the different options of lodging, and also what meals might look like as well. So I tried to communicate with as much as I could at the beginning. And then as I started to get more information, I would just update people in the group chat. I would update this initial itinerary so that it was just a working document as well. And I would save it and then send it out and then rewrite it and then save it and send it out as many times as I needed to get things across. But what I was finding, and as I mentioned, not everybody was getting the same information, and some people's numbers were off the group chat, some people's emails were not working. So I decided to set up a very informal, but for me, because I like this stuff, it was cute, PowerPoint presentation that I did over a Zoom call for everybody. So it was just a way for people to get all the information that I've presented thus far, all of the new information that I gathered up until this point, and people could ask me questions as well. And so I really felt like that was when we all were able to come together as well and just get the same information, ask questions, we could all hear the answers, and I just felt like it was a really great time to kind of kick off the trip as well. I would highly recommend that you do some sort of group something before the trip to help you communicate and also help people get better acquainted with each other if not everybody knows each other. I mean, just because you are a family doesn't mean you all hang out. And so that was important so that people could kind of get off those initial jitters that they may have been feeling. And I thought it was really successful, and everybody said that it was good too. So I'll share that as well below. I feel like this communication section of this video is long, so check out the blog post because I'm gonna go into detail and I don't wanna just feel like I'm blabbing, so check that out. I did also create a Google form. So before the presentation, which I should have talked about, I actually collected a lot of information from my family members / participants. The Google form had information about preferences. It had information about dietary restrictions, likes and dislikes when it came to food. It had information about activity preferences as well. And I came up with a list of activities and then had people vote as to what they wanted to do the most. And then I also had information about kids and kid preferences and kid bedtimes and discipline. It was important for me to add things like discipline and COVID information and vaccine information and payment information into this form. And I know you guys are going to think like, this sounds very serious. Well, on my part, it was, because again, that responsibility was on my shoulders, and I wanted to make sure that I was kind of thinking of as much as I could, because to me, it was important. So for some of you, you can take or leave some of the resources that I'm talking about in this video, or some of the points that I'm talking about as well, if you feel like you don't need them. But I felt like I needed all of these things to not only aid in proper communication with my participants, guests, family members, but also to give me a framework to work off of so I could better plan the trip. So something that was also communicated, but I'm adding as a separate point, is creating a budget. So I wanted to make sure that everything was fair, paid evenly across the board. And I took on the responsibility to just pay whatever extra came up, because I wanted people to come on the trip. I wanted people to have fun, and I didn't want any additional pressures of finances. But the budget had to be communicated clearly, because this is people's money, and I didn't want to make things seem unfair, make things seem fishy. I just wanted people to, be able to afford the trip and to find the price reasonable, but also, make sure that we were able to all contribute so that we could have a better place. And I think the lodging that we chose was fantastic. And the food that we had based off of the budget as well was fantastic. So I had two types of budgets. I created a lodging budget for everybody, and then I also created a meals and incidentals budget as well that allowed people to, just pay for the food. With that money, I purchased all the food and also purchased emergency things as well as part of the incidental budget too. And don't forget that within a budget, you can also include transportation as well. With this trip, we didn't necessarily need to add transportation as an additional cost, because we carpooled and people had their own cars, and most people live in Colorado except for us. So, that wasn't necessarily a part of the budget, but do consider transportation as a part of your budget if you need to. And like I mentioned in that Google form, I talked about activities, and I created that list of activities so that people could decide on what they wanted to do during the trip. And I did that based off of, one, knowing the people that were going to be a part of this trip, and two, listening to the different feedback that I was getting throughout the planning process. And so the activities that I planned, some were adult focused, some were kid focused, and then some were just family oriented as well. Like that group hiking trip that we went on, it was for everybody. And so I would recommend that as you're planning different activities, you have, again, preferences and ages in mind, because sometimes it's nice to just do stuff with adults. Sometimes it's nice to have child-focused activities, but you are on a family trip, so make sure you have at least one or two activities that you all are doing together, including meals. Meals together are very, very fun, and cooking together is also very, very fun. And of course, don't forget to add some downtime in your schedule and time for relaxing as well. People are going on vacation. When you're on vacation, you like to rest. At least I do. So I don't want to be doing something 24/7. But if that's your crew, you do you. You make sure that you plan according to what your group is gonna like. Establish rules and expectations before you go on the trip. And I did that, and that was actually a part of that presentation that I mentioned earlier. I actually had a section for rules, and those were rules given to me by the property that I wanted to make sure to share with everybody else, because I didn't want to be accountable for all the different things that they wanted us to do and me be the only one. So I made sure to share those with everybody, but then I also came up with a section for norms. Norms are kind of like rules that you just create together. So they're basically agreed upon standards that everybody follows because everybody agrees upon them. So for example, one of the norms was everybody take your shoes off. People remembered, and that was something that was talked about. So when I, for example, said, hey, can you remember to take off your shoes? The person would have been like, oh yeah, I remember we talked about that. So sure, I'll take off my shoes. And there are a bunch of other things too that we discussed that we all came up with as a group. So I recommend you do that so that people don't feel like you as the point person are just like spewing out all of these rules. It's a collaborative effort, and it's something that, you know, makes everybody feel more comfortable, more in the know, and yeah, it's just not as strict that way, in my opinion. So one of the reasons for me making this video is I searched for how to plan a multi-family vacation and I didn't find anything. I found some stuff on Pinterest, but I didn't find anything from anybody that looked like me. And you guys know I'm all about representation, all up on these YouTube streets. So I wanted to make sure to make this video for those of you that want to do something similar to what I planned and execute it for your family as well. And with that being said, I created a lot of documents from scratch. So I'm just going to share them. Sharing them for free, why the heck not? Just make sure to check out the resource guide with a bunch of documents down in the description box below so you can cop your free copies of all the good stuff to help you plan your multifamily vacation as you approach summer vacations and all the fun times and just all the great stuff that you're gonna do with your family. If you wanna use the documents to plan, however you want to plan, do so. I will leave them down below. Planning a trip abroad. Oh, I can't wait to do that. Taking my family to see the world. Y'all, you have no idea. My heart is just full with the idea of thinking of these things. It's amazing.